The alien invasion begins. The sky was quiet, peaceful. It was just another ordinary day on Earth. People were going about their usual routines, unaware that something huge was about to happen. All over the world, cities were bustling with life, and the world seemed calm. But deep in space, something was moving closer. Something dangerous, something powerful. The aliens had been watching Earth for a long time. They had studied humans, watched their wars, their technologies, and their history. They thought they knew everything about humanity. And from what they saw, they were sure of one thing. Earth was defenseless. The humans had no chance against them. The alien ships were massive, each one a huge war machine, dark and cold. They looked like giant, armored insects, their surfaces gleaming under the stars. As they entered Earth's atmosphere, they sent out a signal, a message that would soon spread across the planet. It was a warning. Earth had been marked for destruction. The first alien ship landed in the middle of a major city. It crashed down with a loud, terrifying sound. Buildings shook as the giant ship touched the ground. People screamed and ran in all directions, terrified. The ship's doors opened slowly, revealing the aliens, tall, thin, with dark eyes and strange, glowing skin. They didn't speak, but their presence sent a wave of fear across the city. One by one, more ships arrived, landing in different parts of the world. In Europe, Asia, America, and Africa, people looked up to see the sky darkened by the alien crafts. They were everywhere. The aliens had come, and they were not here to make peace. The news spread fast. People saw the ships landing on television, heard reports on the radio. Panic took over. Governments scrambled to respond, but it was clear they were too late. The aliens were already on Earth, and their advanced technology was far beyond anything humans had ever seen. The aliens didn't need to announce their plans. Their actions spoke louder than any words. They started firing powerful energy beams from their ships, destroying buildings, vehicles, and anything in their path. Cities that once stood tall and proud were now reduced to rubble. No army, no weapon could stand against the alien force. In a small town, a group of people huddled in a basement. They could hear the explosions outside, the screams of people running for their lives. Some tried to fight back, but the aliens' weapons were too strong. Soldiers who had been sent to fight couldn't even reach the aliens before being struck down by a single shot. A young man, Mark, stood with his family, trying to stay calm. He didn't know what to do. He looked out the small window and saw the alien ships hovering above the town, casting dark shadows over the streets. His heart raced, but he couldn't show fear. His younger sister, Emma, clung to him, trembling. "We have to do something," Mark said, his voice firm. But even as he said the words, he knew it was impossible. The aliens had power that humans couldn't even dream of. In the chaos, the world tried to respond. Military forces mobilized, trying to defend their cities, but they were outmatched. The alien technology was so advanced that humans' weapons seemed like toys in comparison. Fighter jets were destroyed in seconds. Tanks were turned to dust with a single blast. It was as if the aliens had come to Earth with the sole purpose of proving humanity's weakness. Meanwhile, the leaders of the world gathered in secret meetings. They knew they couldn't defeat the aliens with force alone. They needed a plan, something the aliens didn't expect. But with every passing hour, it became harder to think clearly. Cities were falling, and millions of people were in danger. But there was one thing the aliens didn't know. Humans were not as weak as they seemed. Despite everything, there were still people who refused to give up. In underground bunkers and safe houses, men and women came together, determined to fight back. They weren't soldiers, but they had something the aliens didn't account for: creativity, courage, and the will to survive. The aliens were confident that they had won. They believed that Earth was nothing more than an easy target, a place to conquer and destroy. But what they didn't realize was that humans had been fighting for survival for centuries. Humans were used to overcoming the impossible, and now they were about to prove it again. But the aliens didn't know this yet. They were still focused on their attack, thinking that their victory was certain. As the sun set on the first day of the invasion, the aliens were convinced that they had crushed Earth's defenses. But they were wrong. Very wrong. The first counterattack. The night after the first wave of the alien invasion, Earth was a different place. The air was thick with smoke from burning cities. The once peaceful world was now filled with fear, destruction, and chaos. People were afraid, but they were also angry. Angry that they had been attacked. Angry that they were being crushed by an enemy they couldn't even understand. Around the world, cities were in ruins. Military bases had been destroyed, and entire populations were in panic. Governments had issued emergency orders, and the streets were filled with people running for safety. But the invaders didn't stop. They continued their attack with no mercy, showing no signs of slowing down. It felt like humanity was losing everything. In the small town where Mark and his family had hidden, things were no different. Mark sat in the dark basement with his family, staring at the flickering light of a small radio. The news was bleak. Cities had fallen, millions were dead, and there was still no sign of a way to stop the aliens. But then, something changed. A voice crackled through the radio. It wasn't a government leader or military commander. It was a civilian. A woman's voice, calm and steady, cut through the fear and panic. "We're not giving up," she said. "The aliens think they can destroy us, but we fought worse. We've survived worse, and we will fight back." At first, no one believed her. Who could fight back against the power of the alien invaders? But then the woman explained. She wasn't alone. She and a small group of scientists, engineers, and former soldiers had been working in secret. They had been preparing for this day, and now they were ready to act. They had found a weakness in the aliens' technology, something they hadn't expected. Mark's heart skipped a beat. Could it be true? Was there a way to fight back? The woman, whose name was Sarah, told them all to listen closely. "We've developed a weapon that can temporarily disrupt the aliens' energy shields. It won't last long, but it's enough to give us a chance. It's not much, but it's all we have. We need people who are ready to fight, ready to take a stand. Who's with us?" Mark felt a surge of hope. For the first time since the invasion began, he felt like there was a chance to win. He looked at his family. His younger sister Emma was still afraid, her wide eyes reflecting the fear of the world outside. But his mother, though scared, gave him a small nod. They had to fight back. It was their only choice. Mark turned back to the radio. "We're in," he said, his voice strong. Sarah's voice crackled back. "Good. We'll meet you at the old factory on the edge of town. Be ready." Without wasting a moment, Mark grabbed a few supplies and signaled to his family. They had to move quickly. The aliens were still out there, and if they didn't act soon, they might never get another chance. As Mark and his family left the safety of the basement, they could hear explosions in the distance. The alien ships were still hovering above, firing their weapons on the ground. But now, there was something different in the air. There was a sense of purpose, a sense of defiance. Humans weren't just running anymore. They were fighting back. When they arrived at the old factory, they were surprised to see many others already there. People from all walks of life, from different countries, all ready to do whatever it took to stop the aliens. There were soldiers, doctors, engineers, and even a few teachers, all united by one thing: the will to survive. They had all heard Sarah's broadcast and had come to join the fight. Sarah was there too, standing tall and determined, directing the group. She didn't look like someone who had just seen the world fall apart. She looked like someone who had been waiting for this moment, prepared for it. She quickly explained the plan. "We've got one shot at this," Sarah said. "The aliens don't know we have the weapon yet, but once they find out, they'll come at us harder. We need to make this count." The weapon was a simple device, smaller than most of the alien technology, but it had been designed specifically to disrupt the alien shields. It wouldn't take the aliens down, but it would make them vulnerable. For a brief moment, they could be hurt. And that was all the humans needed. The plan was to move in under the cover of darkness. The device would be set up near an alien ship's landing zone, where the energy shields were strongest. Once activated, it would give them a chance to strike. It wasn't perfect, but it was the only chance they had. Mark felt his pulse quicken as he stood with the group, ready to go. This was real. The aliens had underestimated humanity. They thought Earth was weak, helpless. But now, humans were fighting back. They were showing the aliens that they weren't as defenseless as the invaders had thought. As they moved toward the alien landing zone, Mark couldn't help but think of his family, his friends, and the millions of people who had already been lost. He had no idea if they would succeed, but one thing was certain: they wouldn't go down without a fight. And as the group approached the alien zone, Mark realized one more thing. This was just the beginning. The aliens had made a huge mistake. They had underestimated the power of Earth, revealing Earth's secret weapon. The night was still, the air thick with tension. Mark and the group of resistance fighters moved swiftly through the dark streets, keeping to the shadows as the alien ships hovered above. The distant sound of explosions echoed in the night, a constant reminder of the chaos the aliens were causing. But tonight, things would be different. Tonight, humans would strike back. Mark's heart raced as he looked at the small group around him. They were just ordinary people, soldiers, engineers, teachers, farmers, all united by the same purpose. They weren't heroes, but they had something the aliens didn't expect: the will to survive and a secret weapon that could turn the tide of this war. They reached the old factory, where the weapon had been stored, hidden away from the aliens' view. Sarah, who had been leading them, motioned for everyone to gather around. Her face was serious, but there was a spark of hope in her eyes. She knew what was at stake. This was their chance. "We don't have much time," Sarah said, her voice steady. "The aliens are getting smarter, and they'll start looking for us soon. Once we activate the weapon, we'll have only a few minutes before they react. We need to be fast." Mark nodded. "What exactly is this weapon? You said it could disrupt their shields." Sarah smiled faintly. "That's right. We've been working on this for months, studying the alien technology, finding weaknesses. This device doesn't destroy their ships, but it creates a powerful pulse that interferes with their shields for a short time. It'll make their ships vulnerable for a few minutes, just enough for us to hit them." Mark couldn't believe it. It sounded too simple, too easy. How could something so small make a difference against the aliens' massive war machines? But looking around at the determined faces of the people around him, he knew that it was their only hope. The group moved to the edge of the town, where one of the alien ships had landed. Its massive, dark form loomed in the distance, a silent reminder of the destruction it had already caused. The air around the ship shimmered, the visible energy field surrounding it. Proof of the powerful shields the aliens had used to protect themselves. "We'll place the device near their shields," Sarah explained. "Once it's activated, we'll have a few minutes before the pulse fades. That's when we strike." As they neared the ship, Mark felt a mix of fear and excitement. The aliens had no idea what was coming. They were so confident, so sure of their victory. But they had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to fight back. It was a mistake they would soon regret. The group split up, each person taking a position. Mark stayed with Sarah, who carefully placed the small device on the ground near the alien ship. It was a strange-looking piece of technology, sleek and compact, with glowing lights running along its sides. It looked nothing like the alien ships, but Mark knew it was their best shot at making a difference. "Ready?" Sarah whispered. Mark took a deep breath. "Ready." She activated the device, and for a moment, nothing happened. The alien ship stood silent, its energy shield still in place, glowing faintly. But then, a low hum filled the air, and the shield flickered. For just a second, it seemed to shimmer and bend, the pulse from the device working its magic. Mark could feel the tension in the air, the moment of truth. Then, without warning, the shield collapsed. The alien ship was exposed. "Now," Sarah shouted. The group moved quickly, rushing toward the vulnerable ship. They had only minutes before the shields would regenerate, and they couldn't waste any time. Mark felt his heart pounding in his chest as they reached the ship. The alien technology looked even more intimidating up close, but there was no turning back now. As they planted explosives on the ship's exterior, Mark couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. This was it. They were actually fighting back. The aliens had thought they were invincible, but they were wrong. But just as Mark finished setting the charges, a loud mechanical sound echoed through the air. The ship's engines roared to life. The aliens had noticed the disruption. They were coming. "We have to go now," Sarah yelled. The group ran as fast as they could, adrenaline pumping through their veins. Mark could hear the alien ships above, moving toward them. They hadn't finished their mission yet. The explosives were set, but they needed to get away before the aliens could retaliate. They reached cover just as the first alien craft descended, firing energy blasts in their direction. Mark ducked behind a building, holding his breath. The sound of the alien ships landing was deafening, but they couldn't stop now. They had to get clear before the charges went off. Seconds felt like hours, but finally, the timer on the explosives reached 0. The earth shook as the first explosion went off, followed by a second, then a third. The alien ship's hull cracked and exploded, sending debris flying in every direction. Mark's heart skipped a beat as he watched the ship burn, its powerful energy shield finally shattered. But there was no time to celebrate. The other alien ships were already regrouping, preparing for the counterattack. "We did it," Mark said, breathless. "But we're not safe yet." Sarah nodded grimly. "This is only the beginning. The aliens will be furious, but now they know. We're not giving up, and they're going to regret underestimating us." As the group disappeared into the shadows, the sounds of the explosions still echoing behind them, Mark felt something he hadn't felt in days. Hope. The aliens had made a huge mistake, and humanity was ready to fight back. The aliens strike back. The air was thick with smoke and tension as Mark and the group of resistance fighters made their way back to the hideout. The explosions from their successful attack still rang in their ears, but they knew it wasn't over. The aliens had been stunned, but they wouldn't stay down for long. The first strike had given humanity a taste of victory, but it had also painted a target on their backs. Now, the real fight was about to begin. As they moved through the dark streets, Mark couldn't shake the feeling of dread in his stomach. They had done something they thought was impossible, disrupted the aliens' technology, destroyed one of their ships, but now the aliens would be looking for revenge. They were stronger, faster, and they had far more firepower. Mark knew that the aliens would strike back, and they would do so with everything they had. Back at their hideout, Sarah gathered the group. There was no time for celebration. The message was clear. The aliens weren't just going to let this slide. "They've realized their shields can be breached," Sarah said, her voice steady but tense. "And they're going to come at us harder. We've made a powerful enemy." Mark felt a chill run down his spine. The aliens had underestimated Earth before, but now they were learning just how dangerous humans could be. It wouldn't take long for them to adapt, to find a way to stop humanity's new weapon. The group quickly made plans to move to a new location, staying one step ahead of the aliens. But it was clear that the war was changing. The aliens were no longer just invaders. They were hunting them down. The next morning, the aliens made their move. Without warning, the sky above the city darkened as dozens of alien ships descended, blocking out the sun. Their massive forms cast long shadows across the ground, and the ground trembled beneath them. The first wave of ships had been only the beginning. Now, they had brought their full force. Mark and the others watched from their hideout as the alien ships landed, their engines roaring in the distance. The air was electric with fear. The humans had hoped for a brief moment of victory, but they knew the price they would pay for it would be steep. "They're angry," Mark said, his voice tight with worry. "This is going to be worse than anything we've seen." Sarah nodded grimly. "They're not just coming to fight us anymore. They're coming to wipe us out." Suddenly, the ground shook again, but this time it was different. This wasn't the normal tremor of alien ships landing. It was something much more powerful. The sound was deafening, and the earth seemed to split beneath their feet. Mark's eyes widened in fear as he looked out the window and saw what was happening. The aliens were using their most powerful weapon yet. Massive energy cannons, larger than anything humans had ever seen, were now aimed at the city. The beams they fired cut through the air with deadly precision, obliterating everything in their path. Buildings collapsed, fires erupted, and the streets were filled with screams. The aliens weren't just attacking, they were sending a message. "We've got to move, now," Sarah ordered, her voice filled with urgency. Mark didn't need to be told twice. The group quickly gathered their things, preparing to flee. But as they left the hideout, they saw the full scale of the destruction the aliens had caused. The city that had once been full of life was now a war zone. The sky was dark with the smoke of burning buildings, and the streets were littered with rubble. Mark's heart sank as he thought about all the people who had been caught in the attack, people who had no idea what was coming. The aliens had shown no mercy, and it seemed like nothing could stop them. But even as the aliens unleashed their fury, Mark refused to give up. The humans had proved they could fight back. They had shown that the aliens weren't invincible. If they could do it once, they could do it again. They had to. The group moved through the streets, avoiding the alien forces as best they could. The city was no longer safe, and Mark knew that the only way to win was to keep fighting. They had to find a way to stop the aliens before they wiped out everything humanity had left. As they reached the outskirts of the city, Sarah turned to the group, her expression fierce. "This isn't over. We've struck a blow, but now the aliens will come after us with everything they have. We need to keep moving, keep fighting. They'll never stop unless we make them." Mark nodded, his resolve hardening. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, and the losses would be heavy. But one thing was clear. This was humanity's fight now. The aliens had made a mistake. They had thought Earth was weak, that they could crush it without a second thought. But now they had awoken something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. As the group disappeared into the shadows, Mark couldn't help but feel a fire in his chest. The aliens had struck back with everything they had, but humans were still standing. And they would keep standing, no matter what it took. Desperate measures. The battle was far from over. Humanity had dealt the first blow, but now the full wrath of the alien invaders was upon them. Mark and his group of resistance fighters had barely escaped the alien onslaught, but they knew their time was running out. The aliens were relentless, and with each passing hour, their power grew stronger. The city was a war zone. Buildings lay in ruins, the streets were filled with smoke and debris, and the sound of alien weaponry echoed in the distance. It seemed like nothing could stand against the invaders, but the humans refused to give up. They had fought back once before, and they could do it again. But this time, they needed more than just hope. They needed a plan, a way to hit the aliens where it hurt. Mark, Sarah, and the others had fled to a hidden underground bunker, a place that had been prepared for moments like this. It was a safe house, but it also held something far more valuable: information. Deep within the bunker, there were files, research, and blueprints. Things the aliens had never expected humans to have. "We've got a serious problem," Sarah said, her voice low. "The aliens know we've breached their shields. They'll be more prepared next time. We can't rely on the same tactics anymore." Mark looked at the map spread out before them. It showed the alien ships, their movements, and the locations of key targets. They had learned a lot since the first attack, but they still didn't have a clear way to stop the aliens. The secret weapon was their best hope, but it wouldn't work forever. The aliens would adapt, and they were already starting to do so. "We need to hit them harder," Mark said, his mind racing. "We need to find their weak points and exploit them, and we need to do it quickly before they wipe us out." The group fell silent. They knew what Mark was suggesting. They had already taken a huge risk attacking the aliens' technology, but now they needed to take it a step further. They needed to go on the offensive, striking at the heart of the alien forces. But that would mean facing the full might of the alien fleet head-on. The thought of it was terrifying, but there was no other choice. "I know where their central command is," Sarah said, breaking the silence. "It's a long shot, but if we can disable their command ship, it might disrupt their entire operation. We might just have a chance to cripple their forces." Mark's eyes narrowed. "Where is it?" "It's in the mountains," Sarah explained, pointing to a location on the map. "It's well protected, but if we can get close enough, we might be able to infiltrate it. We need to move fast." Mark nodded. It was a risky plan, one that could cost them everything. But if they didn't take this chance, the aliens would continue their assault until there was nothing left. "We'll do it," Mark said, determination in his voice. "We can't wait for them to come to us. It's time to take the fight to them." The group quickly gathered their gear, preparing for the most dangerous mission they had ever undertaken. They knew the odds were stacked against them, but they also knew that this was their best shot at turning the tide of the war. As they made their way out of the bunker, Mark couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The aliens were everywhere. Their ships hovered above, their weapons ready to strike. But even with the threat of death hanging over them, Mark felt a sense of purpose. Humanity had survived against impossible odds before, and they could do it again. The journey to the mountains was perilous. The alien forces were everywhere, their ships scanning the skies and the ground for any signs of resistance. But Mark and his group moved quickly, staying in the shadows, using the cover of night to their advantage. It took them hours to reach the mountain pass, where the alien command ship was stationed. The ship was enormous, its dark form barely visible against the backdrop of the jagged cliffs. It was surrounded by dozens of smaller ships, all heavily armed and on high alert. "We're going to need a distraction," Sarah whispered, studying the situation. "If we go in head-on, we'll be swarmed before we get close." Mark thought for a moment. He looked at the rest of the group, each of them ready to do whatever it took. They had no choice but to go for broke. If they could disable the command ship, they might just be able to stop the invasion in its tracks. "We can't do it alone," Mark said finally. "We need help. We need to rally more people." Sarah nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "It's going to be dangerous, but if we can get the word out, we might be able to gather enough fighters to launch a full assault. It's the only way we'll stand a chance." Mark turned to the others. They had all seen the destruction the aliens had caused. They had all lost something in this war. But they were still here. They were still fighting. "We'll find a way to make it happen," Mark said. "We've already shown them that we're not as weak as they thought. Now we show them what Earth can really do." As they prepared to make their move, Mark couldn't help but think of all the lives that had been lost, the cities that had been destroyed, the people who had suffered. But this was their moment. It was a chance to turn the tide, to strike at the heart of the alien invaders and show them that Earth was far from defenseless. The aliens had made a mistake, and now humanity would make them regret it. The final assault. The mountain air was cold and thin as Mark and his group reached the outskirts of the alien command base. The massive ship loomed ahead, its dark silhouette barely visible in the dim light of the setting sun. Alien craft flew in and out, their patrols constant, their weapons locked and ready. Mark could feel the tension in the air, the weight of what they were about to do. This was it, the final push. The humans had already lost so much, but they weren't ready to give up. Not yet. If they could strike at the heart of the alien force, they could disrupt everything. And in that disruption, they could find their victory. They had spent days planning, scouting, and preparing for this moment. But no matter how much they had trained, nothing could prepare them for the magnitude of what they were about to face. The odds were stacked against them. The aliens were far stronger, far more advanced, but humanity had something they didn't: determination and the desire to fight for survival. Mark looked at Sarah, who was leading the charge. Her face was focused, but there was a spark of hope in her eyes. They had come this far. They had beaten the odds before, and they could do it again. "We're almost there," Sarah whispered, crouching low behind a boulder. "We need to take them by surprise. Once we're inside, we'll plant the explosives and sabotage their systems. We won't get another chance." Mark nodded. He wasn't scared. Not anymore. He had seen the worst the aliens had to offer, and now they were fighting back. They would give everything to protect their planet. The group moved quickly, staying low and blending into the shadows. The alien defenses were formidable, but there was one thing the aliens didn't anticipate. Humans could adapt quickly. They had spent years studying alien technology, learning their movements, their tactics. It had taken time, but now they were ready. As they reached the outer perimeter of the command ship, Mark's pulse quickened. The entrance was guarded heavily, but there was a small ventilation shaft that led into the heart of the ship. It was a risky move, but it was their only option. "Are you sure this will work?" one of the resistance fighters whispered, his face tense. "It has to," Mark said, his voice steady. "We don't have a choice." Sarah gestured for the group to move forward. They crawled into the ventilation shaft, their bodies scraping against the cold metal as they made their way through the narrow tunnel. It felt like an eternity, the silence pressing in around them. Mark's heart raced, but he focused on the task ahead. They had made it this far. There was no turning back. Finally, they'd reached the ship's control room. The door was heavily guarded, but Mark had anticipated this. He signaled to Sarah, who gave him a quick nod. They were ready. With a loud bang, Sarah threw a small grenade into the room. The explosion echoed through the air, followed by the shouts of alien soldiers. The door flew open, and chaos erupted inside. Mark and the others rushed in, weapons drawn, their hearts pounding. The aliens were caught off guard, but it didn't take long for them to react. Their weapons fired in quick succession, energy blasts lighting up the room. Mark ducked behind cover, returning fire with all the force he could muster. The air was thick with smoke and the sound of gunfire. The humans had the element of surprise, but the aliens were powerful, their weapons far more advanced. Mark could see the look of determination in his comrades' eyes as they fought with everything they had. They couldn't afford to fail. Sarah was the first to make it to the command center. She rushed to the console, typing in the commands she had memorized. Mark covered her as best as he could, but the alien soldiers were relentless. One by one, they took down the invaders, but the aliens were everywhere. It felt like a never-ending battle. "Almost there," Sarah called out. "Just a few more seconds." Mark could hear the sound of reinforcements approaching. The ship's alarms were blaring, and the atmosphere was electric with danger. This was their last chance. With a final click, Sarah hit the last button. The entire ship shook as the systems began to fail. The lights flickered, the energy shields dropped, and a massive explosion rocked the command center. The ship was going down. "We've done it," Sarah shouted, breathless. "Now we need to get out of here, fast." But the alien forces weren't done yet. As the ship began to collapse, Mark and his group rushed for the exit. The walls were buckling, and the floor trembled beneath their feet. The aliens were scrambling, trying to regain control, but it was too late. The damage had been done. The command ship was collapsing. "We've got to go," Now, Mark yelled, pulling Sarah toward the exit. The group raced through the halls, the ship groaning and cracking as it tore apart. Explosions erupted behind them, but they couldn't stop. They had to make it out alive. As they emerged from the wreckage, they watched in awe as the alien command ship exploded in a massive fireball, sending shockwaves through the mountainside. The alien forces were in disarray, their coordination shattered. The tide had turned. Mark looked around at the group, each of them exhausted but alive. They had done it. They had struck at the heart of the alien invasion and crippled their forces. It wasn't over yet, but they had won a crucial victory. "Now we finish this," Sarah said, her voice filled with resolve. Mark nodded. They had taken the first step toward victory, but the war was far from over. The aliens would not give up easily, but neither would they. The humans had shown the aliens that they were not powerless, not defenseless, and the aliens would never forget the fight they had sparked on Earth. The last stand. The alien command ship had exploded in a fiery ball of destruction, but the war was far from over. Mark and his group stood on the edge of the mountain, watching the chaos unfold. The once unified alien forces were now in disarray, but they were not defeated yet. The remaining ships in orbit had begun to regroup, and more ground forces were landing, determined to finish what they had started. But the humans weren't backing down. Mark turned to Sarah, his eyes hard with resolve. "We've crippled their command structure, but we need to make sure they never recover. The aliens are still here. We can't stop until they're all gone." Sarah nodded, determination burning in her eyes. "We've shown them that Earth isn't defenseless. We've proven we can take the fight to them. But we need to rally every last human on this planet. It's time for one final assault." The group had already contacted underground resistance movements across the globe. The signal to fight back had been sent, and across cities, hidden bunkers, and military bases, the humans were rising up. People who had once been afraid, who had hidden from the alien invaders, were now taking up arms. Humanity was united in a way it never had been before. "We have the advantage now," Mark said, as they prepared for the final push. "The aliens are disorganized, and their command structure is shattered. If we keep the pressure on them, they won't be able to recover." The sky was dark with alien ships, but for the first time since the invasion began, the humans felt a glimmer of hope. Earth had fought back, and the aliens could no longer ignore the power of humanity's will to survive. The final battle began as the resistance forces launched their attacks. Across the world, cities erupted into chaos as humans attacked the alien forces with everything they had. The aliens fought back fiercely, but their tactics were no longer coordinated. They had lost their edge. They had underestimated Earth, and now they were paying for it. Mark and his group led the charge in their region, attacking alien supply lines, sabotaging their weapons, and cutting off their communication networks. Every step they took was a victory, and each battle they won pushed the invaders further and further back. It was as if the Earth itself was fighting back. But the aliens weren't finished yet. They had one last weapon, one last chance to crush the humans once and for all. A massive orbital strike that could obliterate entire cities in a single blast. Mark and his team knew they had to stop it, or everything they had fought for would be lost. "They're getting ready to launch the strike from their flagship," Sarah said, urgency in her voice. "If we don't destroy it, they'll wipe us out." Mark clenched his fists. "Then let's finish this." With everything on the line, Mark and his group, alongside a few remaining fighters, launched a final attack on the alien flagship. The ship was enormous, surrounded by layers of defense, but they had no choice. It was all or nothing. The humans fought through wave after wave of alien forces, pushing their way onto the ship. The alien defenses were fierce, but the humans had one advantage. They knew the aliens' weaknesses. They knew how to fight them. They had studied their technology, their tactics, and now they used that knowledge to strike with precision. As they reached the core of the flagship, Mark and Sarah fought side by side, cutting down the last of the alien soldiers. They'd reached the control room, where the final countdown for the orbital strike was underway. 5 minutes until launch, a voice from the alien system announced coldly. Sarah quickly moved to the console, her fingers flying over the keys. The room shook as the countdown continued, but they couldn't stop. Mark kept watch, his heart racing as the seconds ticked away. "Come on," Sarah muttered, sweat dripping down her face. Suddenly, the door burst open, and a group of alien soldiers charged in. Mark didn't hesitate. He fought them off, but the time was running out. 2 minutes. The countdown echoed. Sarah's hand shook, but she refused to give up. With a final, desperate press of the button, she deactivated the launch sequence. The countdown stopped. The room was silent, except for the heavy breathing of the humans. Mark looked at Sarah, who had a smile of disbelief on her face. "We did it," she said quietly. But their victory was short-lived. The remaining alien forces were closing in on their position. They had to get off the ship before it was too late. Mark and the others ran through the ship, their way blocked by more alien soldiers. The corridors shook as explosions rocked the ship. They were running out of time. Finally, they'd reached the escape pods, launching just as the alien flagship began to fall apart. The ship exploded in a massive burst of energy, sending a shockwave that rattled the escape pods. The humans were thrown into space, watching as the alien vessel was torn apart in the distance. As they drifted through space, Mark looked out at the stars, the Earth below them. The aliens had lost. The war was over. The humans had taken back their planet.